the stars above Earth suddenly went dark. Not because night had fallen, but because something massive had arrived. Ships, larger than anything humanity had ever built, materialized in orbit around the planet. Their black hulls absorbed the light, making them look like holes in space itself. Commander Zarthok stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion. He was tall, nearly 8 feet, with dark purple skin and eyes that glowed faint red. Scars covered his arms, each one representing a world he had conquered. 17 star systems had fallen before him. 17 civilizations had either surrendered or been destroyed. Earth would be the 18th. He looked at the blue planet below with something close to boredom. His intelligence officers had studied this world for months. The reports were clear. Humans fought among themselves constantly. They had divided their single planet into hundreds of territories, each one claiming independence. Their weapons were primitive, barely capable of reaching their own moon with any reliability. Their largest ships could not even leave their solar system. "This will take less than a week," Zarthok said to his second-in-command, Velkar. "Possibly less than 3 days if they are wise enough to surrender quickly." Velkar nodded, his mandibles clicking in agreement. The scans show no unified defense grid, no planetary shields. Their most powerful weapons are chemical explosives. They still use projectiles that require physical ammunition. Zarthok almost laughed. His people had abandoned such crude technology 2,000 years ago. Energy weapons had made bullets obsolete across most of the galaxy. These humans were children playing with toys, pretending to be warriors. "Prepare the ultimatum," Zarthok ordered. "Give them 72 hours to surrender. After that, we begin the invasion." On Earth, alarms screamed across every military installation on the planet. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison ran onto the bridge of the USS Valiant, humanity's newest deep space cruiser. She was the pride of the fleet, capable of traveling to Mars in just 3 weeks. Compared to what now filled the sky above, she was a rowboat facing a battleship. "Report," Jake demanded, gripping the railing as he stared at the viewscreen. The alien vessels were clearly visible now, dozens of them, each one the size of a small city. 47 confirmed ships. "Sir," the radar operator said, his voice shaking. "More could be arriving. We've never seen anything like this. They just appeared out of nowhere." Admiral Linda Hayes stepped forward. She was 60 years old, gray-haired, and had spent 40 years in the Navy. She had commanded ships in 3 different wars. But nothing in her experience had prepared her for this moment. "All human vessels are holding position," she said calmly, though Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. "Every nation with spacecraft has moved to alert status. We're waiting to see what they want." They did not have to wait long. The alien broadcast came through on every frequency simultaneously. It appeared on every television, every computer screen, every phone across the entire planet. The translation was perfect, clearly designed to be understood by everyone. The face that appeared was not human, but the message was clear enough. Zarthok spoke slowly, as if addressing slow children. "People of Earth, I am Commander Zarthok of the Krithian Empire. Your world has been selected for annexation. You have 72 hours to surrender your governments, your military forces, and your weapons. If you comply, you will be permitted to live as subjects of the Empire. If you resist, you will be eliminated. There will be no negotiation. There will be no second chances. Choose wisely." The broadcast ended. For several seconds, the bridge of the Valiant was completely silent. Then Captain Ryan Foster's voice crackled over the communications channel. He was stationed on Liberty, one of Earth's orbital defense platforms. The platform was armed with railguns and missile batteries, weapons that had never been fired in actual combat. "Command, this is Liberty Station, requesting permission to respond to the alien transmission." Admiral Hayes hesitated. Every decision she made in the next few minutes could determine the fate of billions. She looked at Jake, then at the rest of her bridge crew. Young faces, most of them. They had signed up to defend Earth from other humans, not from aliens with technology centuries beyond their own. "Permission granted, Liberty," Hayes said finally. "Keep it short." Ryan Foster had lost his wife to cancer 2 years ago. His children were grown, living their own lives. He had spent the last decade of his career on Liberty Station, watching over Earth from above. He had always wondered what he would do if humanity truly faced extinction. Now he knew. His response was broadcast on the same frequencies the aliens had used. Just one word, but it carried the weight of 8 billion souls behind it. Never. On the Dominion, Velkar turned to Zarthok with confusion. They refuse, already, without even considering the offer? Zarthok waved a clawed hand dismissively. It is posturing, primitive bravado. They think a show of courage will intimidate us. They do not understand what they face. When we destroy a few of their cities, they will beg for mercy. But something in the human response had caught his attention. Not fear, not even anger, just flat refusal, as if surrender had never been an option worth considering. Zarthok had heard fear in the voices of 100 species. He had heard desperation, rage, and pleading. This was different. He pushed the thought aside. It did not matter. Courage without power was meaningless. These humans would learn that lesson soon enough. Back on Earth, the world transformed in minutes. Every nation activated emergency protocols. Old enemies called each other within hours. The President of the United States spoke with the Premier of China. The leaders of Russia, India, Brazil, and the European Union held an emergency conference. Ancient grudges were set aside. Political differences became irrelevant. Humanity had been divided for its entire history. Nations had fought nations, religions had fought religions, ideologies had clashed for centuries. But now, facing an enemy from beyond the stars, something changed. Something fundamental shifted in the collective consciousness of the species. They were not Americans or Chinese or Russians anymore. They were human, and someone had just threatened their home. Zarthok did not wait the full 72 hours. Why would he? The humans had refused, and he had no patience for drawing out the inevitable. Exactly 24 hours after his ultimatum, he gave the order to demonstrate the price of defiance. Target their major population centers, he commanded. 4 cities. Make them large enough to be noticed. The death toll should convince them that resistance is futile. The weapons were called plasma lances, and they had burned civilizations to ash before. They fired beams of superheated energy that could vaporize buildings in seconds. The Krithian targeting systems locked onto New York, Beijing, London, and Mumbai. 4 cities, 4 different continents. The message would be impossible to ignore. The beams came down from orbit like fingers of God, white-hot and merciless. They struck in the early morning hours when most people were just waking up. Entire city blocks disappeared in flashes of light. The screams of millions filled the air as buildings collapsed and fires spread through the streets. Colonel Marcus Webb watched it happen from the North American Defense Command, buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The satellite feeds showed the destruction in real time. New York was burning. Manhattan, where his daughter lived, where she worked in a small bookstore in Brooklyn, was gone. Simply gone. His hands shook as he reached for the communications panel. He tried calling her number. No answer. He tried again. Nothing. The networks were overloaded or destroyed, or both. He stared at the screens showing the devastation and felt something break inside him. Then something else took its place. Something colder and harder than grief. "Activate Protocol 7, he said, his voice steady despite the tears on his face. "All production facilities, all research centers, all manufacturing plants. Convert to wartime production immediately. I want every factory in North America building weapons within 24 hours." Similar orders were being given in every country on Earth. The Chinese premier authorized the complete militarization of their industrial sector. The European Union suspended all economic regulations that might slow weapons production. Russia opened their strategic reserves and began distributing weapons to civilian militia. India mobilized their entire population for the war effort. Humanity had been attacked before, nation against nation, army against army. But this was different. This was an attack on the species itself, and the response was unlike anything history had ever seen. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell was 26 years old and had been an engineer for only 3 years. She worked aboard the Endeavour, a research vessel designed to study asteroid composition. When the attack came, she was analyzing the energy signatures from the alien weapons, trying to understand how they worked. What she found made her hands shake with excitement despite the horror of what those weapons had done. "The shields," she whispered, running the data through the computer for the third time. "Their shields rotate through predictable frequencies. They're strong, but they follow a pattern." She brought her findings to the captain immediately. Captain Fletcher was an old man who had spent 40 years in space research. He understood what Sarah was saying before she finished explaining. "You're telling me we can punch through their shields?" "I think so," Sarah said. "If we modify our railgun projectiles to match the frequency gaps, we might be able to bypass their defenses entirely. The shields are designed to stop energy weapons, not physical projectiles fired at exactly the right moment." "How long would it take to modify our ammunition?" "For the Endeavour? 6 hours? For the entire fleet?" She paused. "Maybe 3 days if every ship starts immediately." Fletcher picked up the communication device. "This goes to Earth Command right now. Good work, Mitchell." While humanity scrambled to adapt, Zarthok prepared for the ground invasion. The orbital bombardment had killed approximately 4 million humans. He expected surrender within hours. Instead, he received another message from Earth. It came from someone called the Secretary General of the United Nations, a human named Peter Hoffman. His face appeared on the view screen, and Zarthok was surprised to see no fear in his expression. Only rage barely held in check. "You have murdered millions of innocent people," Hoffman said. "You have attacked a peaceful world without provocation. There will be no surrender. There will be no negotiation. When this is over, you will answer for what you have done." Zarthok laughed. Actually laughed. "You have no power to make demands, human. You are insects beneath my boot. Your weapons cannot harm my ships. Your armies cannot stand against my soldiers. Surrender now, or I will destroy another 4 cities. Then another 4. I will continue until your entire planet is ash." Hoffman leaned forward, his eyes hard. "Then you had better bring more ships." The transmission ended. Zarthok stared at the empty screen with growing frustration. These humans did not understand reality. They were delusional, clinging to pride when they should be begging for mercy. "Deploy the ground forces," he ordered. "Target the Australian continent. It is isolated, lightly defended. We will establish our first foothold there, then expand outward. Send 2 battalions. That should be more than sufficient." Velkar hesitated. "Only 2 battalions, Commander?" "The continent is large." "2 battalions could conquer an entire planet of these primitives," Zarthok snapped. "Do not question my orders." The Krithian dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere like meteors. They landed in the Australian outback, far from major cities, where Zarthok believed resistance would be minimal. 5,000 elite Krithian soldiers emerged from the ships, armed with plasma rifles and protected by personal energy shields. They had never lost a ground engagement. They were met by Commander Kate Sullivan and the Australian Defence Force. Kate was 42 years old, had served in 3 peacekeeping missions, and had grown up in the outback. She knew this land like she knew her own heartbeat. "Let them come inland," she ordered. "Draw them away from their ships. Make them chase us into the desert." The Krithian soldiers advanced confidently, expecting to encounter scattered resistance at best. Instead, they found nothing. Empty roads, abandoned towns, no enemy in sight. They pressed deeper into the outback, following heat signatures that Kate's forces had planted deliberately. Then the trap closed. Explosives buried in the red sand detonated beneath Krithian formations. Snipers fired from positions 2 kilometers away, targeting the joints in alien armor where the shields were weakest. Human fighters used the terrain itself as cover, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. The Krithians had superior weapons and better armor, but they had never fought an enemy that refused to face them directly. They had never encountered guerrilla warfare, never dealt with an opponent that used hit-and-run tactics perfected over centuries of human conflict. Kate watched through binoculars as a Krithian squad walked into a canyon her people had trapped. She triggered the detonator herself. The canyon walls collapsed, burying 50 alien soldiers under tons of rock. "That's for New York," she whispered, "and we're just getting started." By the end of the first day of ground combat, Zarthok had lost 300 soldiers. 300 against an enemy that should have been helpless. His officers brought him reports of ambushes, traps, and coordinated attacks that showed a level of tactical sophistication they had not expected. "They are fighting like the Kresh," Velkar said, referring to a species the Krithians had fought 2 centuries ago. "Hit and run." They refused direct engagement. Zarthok slammed his fist on the command console. "Then we will burn the entire continent if we must. Increase the deployment to 6 battalions. I want every human soldier on that landmass dead within the week." But even as he gave the order, doubt crept into his mind. These humans should have broken by now. They should have surrendered after the cities burned. Instead, they were fighting harder. Every report from the ground showed increased resistance, not decreased. Human forces were growing bolder, not more desperate. What kind of species fought harder after losing millions of their people? On Earth, Colonel Marcus Webb sat in his command center and coordinated with military leaders across the planet. The message from Sarah Mitchell about the shield frequencies had spread to every human vessel in orbit. Modifications were underway, weapons were being adapted, plans were being made. His daughter was dead. 4 million others were dead. But humanity was not broken. If anything, Zarthok's attack had done the one thing no human leader had ever accomplished. It had Unit Zarthok made a decision that had won him battles across 17 star systems. When faced with unexpected resistance, apply overwhelming force. Crush the enemy so completely that continued resistance becomes psychologically impossible. He committed half his fleet to direct atmospheric assault. 23 capital ships descended from high orbit, their weapon systems targeting every major military installation on the planet. If the humans wanted war, he would give them war on a scale their primitive minds could not comprehend. The bombardment began at dawn across multiple time zones. Military bases in Colorado, Siberia, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia disappeared under plasma fire. The Krithian ships hung in the sky like dark gods, raining destruction on anything that resembled organized human defense. Millions more died in the first hour. But humanity had spent those precious few days since the first attack preparing, not just building weapons, but learning, adapting, doing what humans had done since the first tribe faced the first predator. They found a way to fight back. Admiral Paul Henderson commanded the lunar base Armstrong, humanity's furthest military outpost. The base had been designed for research and exploration, not warfare. But in 3 days, it had been transformed into a weapons platform. Every railgun that could be spared from Earth had been shipped to the moon. Every missile, every piece of ammunition that could make the journey. And most importantly, every weapon had been modified using Sarah Mitchell's discovery about the shield frequencies. "All batteries prepare to fire," Paul ordered. He was 65 years old, had planned to retire next year. Now he was coordinating humanity's first offensive strike against an alien empire. "Target coordinates are locked. Fire on my mark." The lunar railguns opened fire simultaneously. Dozens of projectiles, each one the size of a telephone pole, launched from the moon toward the Krithian ships in Earth's atmosphere. The projectiles had been carefully timed, their approach calculated to hit during the precise moment when the alien shields rotated to their weakest frequency. 3 Krithian cruisers never saw it coming. The projectiles punched through their shields as if they were not there, tearing through hull plating designed to withstand energy weapons, but not physical impacts at such extreme velocities. 2 ships exploded immediately, their power cores breached. The third ship's engines failed, and it began a slow spiral toward the Pacific Ocean, trailing fire and debris. On the Dominion, Zarthok watched 2 of his ships die and could not believe what he was seeing. How? How did they penetrate our shields? Velkar checked the tactical data, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "Commander, they used kinetic weapons, physical projectiles. But the timing suggests they somehow predicted our shield rotation frequencies. That should be impossible. Our encryption is unbreakable." "Apparently not," Zarthok growled. For the first time since the invasion began, he felt genuine concern. These humans were adapting faster than any species he had ever fought. They had gone from helpless targets to a legitimate threat in less than a week. The crippled cruiser crashed into the ocean 200 kilometers west of California. Within 30 minutes, human recovery teams were on site. The ship had broken apart on impact, but large sections remained intact, sinking slowly toward the ocean floor. Dr. Helen Carter led the recovery operation from a submarine. She was a marine engineer, had spent 20 years studying deep-sea technology. Now, she was diving to salvage alien technology that could change the course of the war. "We need the power cores," she told her team over the communication system, "and any data storage we can find. Computer systems, navigation equipment, anything that might tell us more about their technology." The dive was dangerous. Pieces of the ship were still hot from atmospheric entry. Strange fluids leaked from ruptured systems, some of them clearly toxic. But Helen and her team worked carefully, cutting through alien metal with torches, hauling pieces up to the waiting ships above. What they found was remarkable. The Crithian power systems were incredibly advanced, capable of generating massive amounts of energy from relatively small cores. But the systems were poorly protected, designed with the assumption that enemy fire would never penetrate the shields. It was like building a fortress with paper-thin walls because you believed the moat was uncrossable. "They're overconfident," Helen reported to Earth Command. "Their technology is amazing, but they haven't designed it with the expectation that anyone could actually hurt them. Every system has weak points that shouldn't exist in military hardware." This intelligence spread through human research facilities within hours. Engineers in Japan, scientists in Germany, programmers in India, all working together to understand and exploit the weaknesses in Crithian technology. The internet, once used for entertainment and argument, had become humanity's greatest weapon. Information flowed freely across all borders. On the ground, the war had become a nightmare for Crithian forces. Major Chris Baldwin coordinated resistance cells across Europe. He was 38, had been a special forces operator before the invasion. Now he commanded a network of fighters that stretched from Spain to Poland. The Crithians had taken control of several major cities, but they could not hold them. Every building was a potential ambush site. Every basement could hide a weapons cache. Every civilian might be carrying explosives under their coat. Chris watched from a rooftop in Berlin as a Crithian patrol moved through the ruined streets below. 12 soldiers, walking in formation, plasma rifles ready. They had learned to be cautious after losing so many troops to ambushes. It did not help them. The building they were passing had been rigged 3 days ago. Chris triggered the detonator remotely. The explosion brought down the entire structure, burying the patrol under tons of rubble. Before the dust had even settled, Chris and his team were already moving to their next position. "That's the third patrol today," one of his fighters said. Her name was Lisa, had been a school teacher before the invasion. Now she carried a rifle and killed aliens with the same calm focus she had once used to teach mathematics. "They still don't understand urban warfare," Chris replied. "They think superior firepower is enough. They don't realize that in a city, the defender has all the advantages." The Crithians were learning, but slowly, too slowly. Every day they remained on Earth, they lost more soldiers to tactics they had never encountered. Booby traps, ambushes, snipers, civilian resistance, poisoned supplies, sabotaged equipment. Humans fought with a creativity born from thousands of years of warfare against their own kind. Zarthok pulled his ground forces back to defensive positions. He ordered his ships to maintain high orbit, beyond the range of the lunar railguns. He was being forced to adapt his strategy, something he had not had to do in decades. "We are losing this war," Velkar said quietly, speaking a truth that both of them had been avoiding. "No," Zarthok said firmly. "We are not losing. We are simply facing more resistance than expected. I will not be the first Crithian commander to fail. I will not return to the Empire in defeat." "Then what do you propose?" Zarthok stared at Earth on the view screen. The blue planet that should have been an easy conquest, a minor footnote in his career. Instead, it had become a quagmire that was consuming his forces and his reputation. "We destroy it," he said finally. "If we cannot conquer Earth, then no one will have it. Prepare the Planet Killer weapon." The Planet Killer was the Dominion's most powerful weapon. It required 6 hours to charge and consumed enough energy to power a small city for a year. But once fired, it would crack Earth's crust, trigger volcanic eruptions across the entire planet, and render it uninhabitable for centuries. Velkar hesitated. Commander, the Empire wanted this world for colonization. If we destroy it, we gain nothing. Better nothing than defeat, Zarthok snapped. Begin the charging sequence. I will broadcast one final ultimatum to the humans. If they do not surrender immediately, their world dies. Jake Morrison received the news while aboard the Valiant. Admiral Hayes had been killed 2 days ago when her ship took a direct hit from a Crithian cruiser. Jake was now in command of what remained of the human space fleet. 27 ships of various sizes, all damaged, many barely functional. He's going to destroy the planet, Jake said, reading the tactical analysis. The weapon charge time is 6 hours. After that, Earth is gone. His crew looked at him, waiting for orders, waiting for hope. They were exhausted, mourning friends and family, holding together through sheer willpower. But they were still here, still fighting. Then we have 6 hours to stop him, Jake said. Get me a line to every human vessel in space, every ship, every shuttle, every station. If it can fly and carry weapons, I want it ready to move. Sir, we're outnumbered 3-1, his tactical officer said. They still have 29 capital ships operational. We can't win a direct engagement. The Dominion hung in geosynchronous orbit, 36,000 kilometers above Earth. Energy readings spiked across every sensor on the planet as the planet killer weapon began its charging cycle. Scientists calculated that once fully charged, the weapon would fire a concentrated beam capable of punching through Earth's crust directly into the mantle. The resulting geological catastrophe would end all life on the planet within months. Zarthok broadcast his final ultimatum. His face appeared on every screen across Earth, his expression hard and unyielding. Humans of Earth, you have fought bravely but foolishly. In 6 hours, my weapon will be fully charged. When it fires, your world will die. This is your last chance for survival. Surrender now, submit to the Empire, and you will be permitted to evacuate your most essential population to colony worlds. Refuse, and you all die. There will be no further negotiation. The broadcast ended. Across Earth, billions of people looked up at the sky, knowing what hung above them, knowing they had 6 hours left to live unless someone could stop what was coming. But surrender was never discussed. Not in any government chamber, not in any military command center, not in any home where families gathered to await their fate. Humanity had made its choice days ago. They would rather die free than live as slaves. Jake Morrison gathered the commanders of every remaining human vessel for a final strategy session. The conference took place over secure channels, voices coming from ships scattered across Earth's orbital space. The plan is simple, Jake said, displaying a tactical map. We throw everything we have at the Dominion. Every ship, every weapon, every last missile. We only need to accomplish one thing: stop that weapon from firing. Their fleet will intercept us long before we reach the flagship, Captain Liu of the Chinese battlecruiser Yangtze said. Her ship was damaged, limping along on backup power. We will be destroyed. Probably, Jake agreed. But while they're destroying us, we'll be buying time. Captain Foster has volunteered Liberty Station for a special approach. The station will position itself for a collision course with the Dominion's weapon array. If he can hit them during the charging sequence, it might destabilize the entire system. A suicide run, someone said quietly. Yes, Jake confirmed. But Ryan has made his choice. His crew has volunteered to stay with him. They know what they're doing. Across the channel, Ryan Foster's voice came through clearly. We've already lost Earth as we knew it. Billions are dead. Our cities are ruins. If we can save what's left by sacrificing one station and 53 volunteers, that's not a hard choice. That's an honor. Sarah Mitchell spoke up from her position aboard the Valiant. She had been working non-stop since discovering the shield frequency weakness, barely sleeping, surviving on coffee and determination. I have one more weapon. It's experimental. Actually, it's completely untested and might explode the moment we try to use it. What kind of weapon? Jake asked. I've been studying the power cores we salvaged from the crashed cruiser. I think I can overload one and turn it into a missile. If it works, and if their shields are down, it should cause a chain reaction in their power grid. Theoretically, it could disable their entire ship. And if it doesn't work? Sarah smiled grimly. Then we die anyway, so we won't have lost anything by trying. Jake looked at the tactical display, at the positions of all their ships, at the Dominion hanging in space like a dark moon. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing technology centuries ahead of their own. By every logical measure, they should surrender. All ships, prepare for final assault, Jake ordered. We launch in 90 minutes. Make peace with whatever you believe in. And if anyone wants to send final messages to loved ones, now is the time. He closed the channel and sat in his command chair, staring at Earth through the viewport. From this distance, the planet still looked beautiful. Blue and white, peaceful, unmarred by the destruction that had ravaged its surface. He thought about his sister in Toronto, his parents in Florida, all probably dead now. He thought about the life he had planned, the career he had imagined, all of it gone. But he did not feel despair. He felt something else. A strange calm, mixed with purpose. If these were humanity's last hours, they would face them fighting. The 90 minutes passed too quickly. Human ships began moving into position, forming up for the final attack. The USS Valiant took point, with the Yangtze and the European carrier Unity flanking. Behind them came destroyers, frigates, supply ships that had been hastily armed with whatever weapons could be mounted. Even civilian vessels, converted freighters and mining ships, crewed by volunteers who refused to sit idle while humanity made its last stand. Zarthok watched the human ships approaching and felt a mixture of admiration and frustration. These creatures simply would not break. Even now, facing certain death, they came forward with weapons ready. All ships, intercept formation, he ordered. Destroy them before they reach firing range. The Krithian fleet moved to engage. Energy weapons lit up the darkness of space. Human ships began exploding, their hulls torn apart by plasma fire. But they kept coming, returning fire with railguns and missiles, dying but not running. The Yangtze took 3 direct hits to her engines and began tumbling out of control. Captain Liu's last transmission was calm. Continue the attack. Don't stop for us. The ship exploded seconds later, taking a Krithian destroyer with it as her reactor overloaded. Jake gritted his teeth as another human vessel disappeared from his tactical display. They were losing ships faster than he had hoped, but they were also getting closer. The Dominion was less than 5,000 kilometers away now. Lieutenant Mitchell, how is our special weapon? Jake called out. Sarah was in the weapons bay, personally overseeing the modified Krithian power core. The device was glowing with barely contained energy, held in place by magnetic clamps. It looked like it wanted to explode, which was essentially what Sarah had designed it to do. Ready to launch, sir, she replied, but I need their shields down first. This thing won't penetrate their defenses. Understood. Captain Foster, you're up. Ryan Foster had been waiting for those words. Liberty Station was old, outdated, held together by welds and prayers. But her engines still worked, and that was all he needed. He set course directly for the Dominion, pushing the station's thrusters to maximum. The Krithian point defense systems opened fire immediately. Energy beams sliced through Liberty's outer hull, tearing away sections of the station. Alarms screamed. Fires broke out across multiple decks. Ryan's crew worked frantically to keep the engines running, knowing that every second brought them closer to their target. Hull breach on decks 4 through 7, someone shouted. We're venting atmosphere. Seal the affected sections, Ryan ordered. Keep those engines running. He could see the Dominion growing larger in the viewport. The massive ship was beautiful in its own terrifying way, all dark metal and glowing energy. The planet-killer weapon was clearly visible now, a massive barrel extending from the ship's underside, crackling with building power. More weapons fire struck Liberty. The station shuddered, groaned, began breaking apart. Ryan knew they would not survive more than another minute. But they were close now. So close. All crew, evacuate to escape pods, Ryan ordered. This is not a request. Get out now. Sir, we volunteered to stay, his second officer protested. And I'm ordering you to live, Ryan said firmly. Someone needs to tell the story of what happened here. Someone needs to remember. Now go. He sealed the bridge doors, locking himself inside alone. His crew protested over the communication system, but they were already heading for the escape pods. They would live to fight another day. Ryan looked at the Dominion through the cracked viewport. He thought about his wife, dead from cancer. He thought about his children, hopefully safe somewhere. He thought about Earth, beautiful and blue, waiting behind him. For everyone we lost, he whispered. For everyone who can't fight anymore. This is for them. He slammed his hand down on the manual override, pushing Liberty's engines past their safety limits. The station lurched forward with a final burst of speed, closing the last 1,000 meters in seconds. The impact was catastrophic. Liberty Station struck the Dominion's weapon array at over 300 meters per second. Metal crumpled, systems exploded, fire and debris spread across 3 decks of the Crithian flagship. The planet-killer weapon, mid-charge cycle, destabilized catastrophically. Energy feedback surged through the Dominion's power grid. And most importantly, for exactly 4 seconds, the Dominion's shields went completely offline as the ship's systems automatically rerouted power to contain the damage. Shields are down, Sarah shouted from the weapons bay. Firing now! She launched the modified power core. The device streaked across the gap between the Valiant and the Dominion, a small sun of barely contained energy. It struck the Crithian flagship's hull directly, punching through armor that had never been designed to take kinetic impacts. The power core penetrated deep into the ship before finally detonating. The explosion was not large, not at first, but it spread through the Dominion's energy grid like lightning through a circuit. Overloads cascaded from system to system. Power cores began failing across the entire ship. Zarthok felt his flagship die around him. The lights went out. The Dominion drifted in space, powerless and broken. Emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the bridge where Zarthok stood, staring at the view screen. Human ships surrounded his crippled flagship, weapons locked and ready. More ships were arriving every minute, pulling back from the battle across Earth's orbital space. He had lost. The realization settled over him like ice water. In 40 years of military service, across 17 conquered star systems, he had never experienced defeat. The concept was alien to him, more foreign than the humans themselves. Commander, they are hailing us, Velkar said quietly. Zarthok wanted to refuse, wanted to order his remaining ships to fight to the last soldier. But as he looked at the tactical display, he saw the truth. Half his fleet was destroyed. The rest were damaged, outnumbered, and facing an enemy that had proven far more capable than anyone had believed possible. Accept the transmission, he said. Jake Morrison's face appeared on the view screen. The human looked exhausted, his uniform stained with blood and soot. But his eyes were hard and unwavering. Commander Zarthok, I am Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison of the United Earth Defense Force. Your flagship is disabled. Your fleet is scattered. You have 2 options. Surrender now, and your surviving forces will be treated according to the laws of war. Your wounded will receive medical care. Your crew will not be harmed, or you can continue fighting, and we will destroy every last ship in your fleet. Choose now. Zarthok felt rage boiling inside him. To surrender was to disgrace himself, his crew, his entire career. But to fight was to condemn thousands of his soldiers to death for nothing more than pride. You offer mercy to your enemies? Zarthok asked, unable to hide his surprise. We killed millions of your people. We destroyed your cities. You should want revenge. We want this war to end, Jake replied simply. Killing your soldiers now won't bring our dead back. It would just create more corpses. So I'm offering you a chance to save your crew. Take it. Zarthok looked at Velkar, at the other officers on his bridge. Young faces, some of them. Soldiers who had followed his orders, trusted his judgment. He had led them into this disaster through arrogance and miscalculation. Did he have the right to lead them into death as well, just to preserve his pride? I accept your terms, Zarthok said, the words bitter in his mouth. The Krithian forces surrender. He was the first Krithian commander in recorded history to speak those words. The shame would follow him forever, but his crew would live. Across Earth's orbital space, Krithian ships powered down their weapons and transmitted surrender codes. Human vessels moved in to escort them to designated holding positions. The battle was over. On Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Humanity had won. Against impossible odds, against technology centuries beyond their own, they had defeated a galactic empire. The celebrations were muted, tempered by the massive casualties and destruction. But there was relief, hope, and something else. Pride in what they had accomplished together. Colonel Marcus Webb stood in the ruins of what had once been New York City. The devastation stretched for kilometers in every direction. Fires still burned in some places. Bodies were still being recovered. His daughter had been found 3 days ago, alive in a shelter deep underground. It was the first time he had cried since the invasion began. Now he coordinated with recovery teams, helping to rebuild. Every nation had sent aid. Chinese engineers worked alongside American soldiers. Russian medical teams treated European refugees. The old borders, the old divisions, seemed meaningless now. They were all human, all survivors of the same nightmare. Major Chris Baldwin walked through the streets of Berlin, surveying the damage. The city had been beautiful once. Now it was scarred and broken, but still standing. Lisa walked beside him, still carrying her rifle even though the fighting was over. Old habits died hard. "What do you think happens now?" she asked. Chris looked up at the sky where human ships were processing the Krithian surrender. "I think everything changes. We're not alone anymore. The galaxy knows we're here, and they know we don't break easily." Dr. Helen Carter led a team of scientists aboard one of the captured Krithian vessels. The aliens had been moved to secure facilities on the ground, and now humanity had access to their ships, their technology, their computers. It was a treasure trove of information that would take years to fully analyze. What they found painted a picture of a galaxy far more complex than anyone had imagined. The Krithian Empire was just one of dozens of major powers. Some were peaceful, some were aggressive, all were watching Earth with new interest. The Krithians had rushed their invasion specifically to claim Earth before other empires could stake a claim. "We're surrounded," Helen reported to the newly formed Earth Command. "The galaxy is full of civilizations, and most of them are more advanced than we are. Some of them are already expressing interest in contact. Some are probably planning their own invasions." "Then we need to be ready," Jake Morrison replied. He had been promoted to admiral, given command of Earth's defense forces. It was not a position he had wanted, but it was one humanity needed him to fill. "We've proven we can defend ourselves. Now, we need to make sure we can keep doing it." The Krithian prisoners were held in facilities designed specifically for them. They were treated well, given medical care, provided with food suitable for their biology. It confused them. Every species the Krithians had conquered, they had enslaved or exterminated. The concept of treating prisoners humanely was foreign to their culture. Zarthok sat in his cell, which was more like a small apartment than a prison. He had access to books, entertainment, even communication with his crew in other facilities. It was comfortable. It was also the worst punishment he could imagine, because it forced him to confront what he had done. A human doctor visited him regularly. Her name was Patricia, and she was studying Krithian biology to better understand their medical needs. She was kind, professional, and showed no anger toward him despite everything his invasion had caused. "Why do you treat us like this?" Zarthok asked her during one visit. "We are your enemies. We killed your people." Patricia considered the question while checking his vital signs. "Because killing you won't help anyone. Because you surrendered, which means the war is over. And because treating prisoners well is not about you. It's about us. It's about the kind of species we want to be." Zarthok thought about that after she left. His empire built itself on conquest and domination. Strength was the only virtue they recognized. Mercy was weakness. But these humans had defeated him through determination, creativity, and unity. They had shown strength in ways he had never considered. Perhaps there were different kinds of power. Perhaps he had been wrong about more than just Earth's military capabilities. Months passed. Earth began to rebuild. The casualties were staggering. Over 2 billion dead from the orbital bombardments, the ground battles, the destruction of infrastructure. Entire cities needed to be reconstructed. Economies were shattered. But humanity was resilient. They had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars. They would survive this too. The United Earth Council was formally established, a genuine world government born from the necessity of coordinating planetary defense. Every nation had representation. Decisions were made collectively. It was not perfect, arguments and disagreements were common, but it was functional in a way that would have been impossible before the invasion. The Crithian technology was being reverse-engineered and adapted. Human ships were being upgraded with energy shields, faster engines, more powerful weapons. Sarah Mitchell led a research team at the new Advanced Technology Center in Geneva, working on designs that combined human innovation with alien engineering. "We're not just copying their technology," she explained during a presentation to the council. "We're improving it." The Crithians designed everything assuming they would always have superior firepower. They never had to think defensively. "We're building ships that can take punishment and keep fighting. Ships designed by people who know what it's like to be the underdog." Captain Ryan Foster was mourned as a hero. A memorial was built at the crash site of Liberty Station, which had fallen to Earth in pieces after the collision. His children attended the dedication ceremony, accepting a medal on his behalf. His sacrifice had saved billions of lives. Jake Morrison stood before the council, presenting a 5-year defense plan. "The galaxy is watching us now. Some civilizations want to trade, some want to study us, and some probably want to conquer us like the Crithians tried. We need to be ready for all possibilities." "What about the Crithian Empire?" someone asked. "What happens when they send a larger fleet to avenge this defeat?" "Our intelligence suggests that won't happen," Jake replied. "The Crithian Empire is in political chaos. Zarthok's defeat has undermined their aura of invincibility. Subject worlds are rebelling. Other powers are taking advantage of their weakness. They have bigger problems than Earth right now." The council approved the defense plan. Shipyards were being built in orbit and on the moon. Earth's industries, already converted to wartime production, continued building weapons and ships. But they were also building homes, hospitals, schools. War had united humanity, but peace required just as much effort. 5 years had passed since the invasion. Earth had transformed in ways that would have seemed impossible before Zarthok's arrival. The scars of war remained visible, cities still rebuilding, memorials marking places where millions had died. But humanity had not merely survived. They had evolved. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Earth Defense Station Horizon, watching ships move through the orbital traffic lanes. Human ships, dozens of them, with sleek designs that combined Earth engineering with adapted alien technology. Freighters carrying supplies to the growing lunar colonies, military vessels on patrol routes, research ships preparing for deep space exploration missions. "It's hard to believe this is the same planet," Captain Daniel Green said, standing beside him. Daniel commanded one of the new Explorer-class cruisers, ships designed specifically for long-range missions beyond the solar system. "We had no choice but to change," Jake replied. "The galaxy doesn't care if we're ready or not. We're part of it now, whether we like it or not." The first alien contact after the Crithian surrender had come from a species called the Valeks. They were traders, curious about the newcomers who had defeated the supposedly invincible Crithian Empire. The meeting had been tense, both sides armed and cautious. But no shots were fired. Instead, they talked. The Valeks explained the political landscape of the galaxy, empires rising and falling, trade networks spanning hundreds of star systems, ancient civilizations that had existed for millennia. And Earth suddenly thrust into this complex web of relationships, allies, and threats. "The galaxy sees us differently now," Jake continued. "Before, we were just another primitive world to be exploited. Now we're the species that beat the Crithians. That reputation buys us respect and caution, and makes us a target Daniel added. That too, Jake admitted. Which is why we keep building, keep training, keep preparing. The Earth Defense Force now numbered over 200 ships, ranging from small patrol craft to massive carriers. The lunar shipyards worked around the clock, building more. Mars had 3 new colonies, each one supporting mining operations that fed raw materials back to Earth. Humanity was expanding into its solar system at a pace that would have taken decades without the technology gained from the Crithian ships. Sarah Mitchell walked through the Advanced Technology Research Center, now a sprawling complex that employed over 10,000 scientists from every nation on Earth. Her team had made breakthrough after breakthrough, not just copying alien technology, but innovating beyond it. The new shield generators are ready for testing, her assistant Kevin reported. He was young, barely 25, but brilliant. The war had accelerated so many careers, pushed young people into positions of responsibility years before they would have been ready in the old world. Show me, Sarah said. Kevin pulled up the specifications on a holographic display. The shields were based on Crithian technology but redesigned from the ground up. Where the Crithian shields rotated through predictable frequencies, the human version randomized constantly, making it nearly impossible to predict weak points. We learned from how we beat them, Kevin explained. We knew their weakness, so we made sure our shields don't have the same flaw. Plus, they use 40% less power than the Crithian version. Sarah smiled. This was what humanity did best. They adapted, improved, and found new solutions to old problems. The Crithians had developed their technology over millennia, but they had grown complacent. Humans were still hungry, still desperate to prove themselves. Start production, she ordered. Every ship gets upgraded within 6 months. On Earth, Colonel Marcus Webb had retired from active military service. He spent his time now helping to rebuild New York City, working alongside the thousands of volunteers who were literally raising the city from its ashes. His daughter Catherine worked beside him, having become an engineer specifically to help with the reconstruction. The memorial is almost finished, Catherine said, showing him the plans on a tablet. The New York Memorial would honor the 4 million who died in the first orbital strike. It would be a place for remembrance, but also for hope. A statement that humanity had not been broken. Your mother would have loved it, Marcus said quietly. His wife had died years before the invasion, cancer taking her long before the aliens arrived. Sometimes he wondered if that was a mercy, that she did not have to see the horrors that followed. I think she'd be proud of what we've become, Catherine replied. We're better than we were, more united, more focused on what actually matters. It was true. The old petty conflicts that had consumed so much human energy seemed ridiculous now. Arguments about borders, about resources, about ideology, all of it had been swept away by the simple need to survive. Nations still existed, but they cooperated in ways that would have been unthinkable before the war. Major Chris Baldwin had taken a position training the new generation of ground forces. The Earth Defense Force needed soldiers who understood urban warfare, guerrilla tactics, and asymmetric combat. Chris and others like him, veterans of the desperate street battles against Crithian troops, were now teaching those lessons to thousands of recruits. The key is adaptability, he told his class of young officers. The Crithians were stronger, better armed, and had superior technology. But they couldn't adapt. They fought the same way every time, using the same tactics that had worked on a dozen other worlds. We won because we changed constantly, tried new things, and never let them predict what we'd do next. Lisa, the former teacher turned resistance fighter, had returned to education. But now she taught military history at the Earth Defense Academy, sharing the lessons learned from the invasion with students who would defend humanity in the future. Remember, she told her students, technology is not everything. The Crithians had better ships, better weapons, better armor. They should have won easily. But they didn't understand human determination. They didn't understand that we would rather die fighting than live as slaves. The Crithian prisoners had become an unexpected resource. Not all of them had embraced their defeat, but many had begun cooperating with human authorities. They shared information about the galaxy, about other civilizations, about threats humanity had not yet encountered. Zarthok himself had become something of an advisor. It was a strange situation, the defeated warlord now helping the species that had beaten him. But he had come to respect humanity in his years of captivity, and he understood that the Crithian Empire's old ways were dying. There is a race called the Drevenor, he told Jake during one of their regular meetings. They control a small empire near your sector. They are aggressive, expansionist, and they do not value individual life. When they hear about Earth's resources and location, they will come. Are they stronger than the Crithians? Jake asked. No, Zarthok admitted. But they are more ruthless. They do not take prisoners. They do not offer terms. They simply destroy any opposition and take what they want. Then we'll be ready for them too, Jake said simply. Zarthok studied the human admiral. Jake was younger than him, less experienced in galactic politics, commanding a fleet that was tiny compared to most major powers. But there was a confidence in him, a certainty that humanity would overcome whatever challenges came next. You have changed my understanding of strength, Zarthok said. I believed it was about superior firepower, about domination. But your people defeated mine through unity, through sacrifice, through the willingness to never surrender even when defeat seemed certain. Perhaps that is the greater strength. We had good teachers, Jake replied. You showed us what we were fighting against. That clarified things remarkably. The long-range sensors, upgraded with Crithian technology and human improvements, detected the new fleet 3 months later. 15 ships, unknown configuration, approaching from the galactic north. They were not responding to hails and were heading directly for Earth. The Earth Defense Force went to full alert. Every ship, every station, every defense platform prepared for battle. The memories of the Crithian invasion were still fresh. Humanity would not be caught unprepared again. Jake stood on the bridge of the new flagship, the EDS Defiance, watching the unknown ships approach. His crew was calm, professional, ready. They had trained for this moment. The entire species had trained for this moment. All weapons armed, his tactical officer reported. Shield generators at maximum. All ships report ready. The unknown vessels entered weapons range. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a transmission came through, audio only, in heavily accented but understandable English. Human vessels, this is Trade Master Kelvin of the Valix Commerce Guild. We come seeking trade agreements and cultural exchange. We mean no harm and request permission to approach your world. The tension on the bridge dissolved into relieved laughter. Not every contact would be hostile. Not every alien would be an enemy. The galaxy was vast and complex, full of possibilities both dangerous and wonderful. Permission granted, Trade Master, Jake replied. Welcome to Earth. We have much to discuss. As the Valix ships moved into orbit under escort, Jake looked at his crew, at the tactical displays showing Earth's defenses, at the planet below that had survived the impossible. Humanity had been thrust onto the galactic stage by violence and tragedy. They had lost billions in the process, but they had also gained something precious: unity, purpose, the absolute certainty that they could face whatever the universe threw at them. Zarthok had made one mistake. He had judged Earth by what it was rather than what it could become. He had seen divisions and assumed weakness. He had seen primitive technology and assumed helplessness. He had attacked a world he thought would be an easy conquest. Instead, he had awakened something in humanity that had always been there but had never been fully realized. The capacity to unite against a common threat. The willingness to sacrifice everything for survival. The determination to never, ever surrender. And now, 5 years later, Earth stood as a rising power in a galaxy that had learned to respect human resolve. They were no longer the unknown species on the backwater planet. They were the civilization that had defeated the Crithian Empire. The people who had proven that technology was not everything, that spirit and determination could triumph over superior force. Sarah Mitchell looked up at the stars from her laboratory, no longer seeing them as distant and unreachable. Humanity's ships traveled between those stars now. Human colonies were growing on other worlds. The universe that had once seemed so vast and frightening was becoming home. Marcus Webb stood at the New York Memorial with his daughter, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and red. The city was alive again, rebuilt, vibrant, full of people who refused to let tragedy define them. Chris Baldwin trained another class of officers, teaching them the lessons written in blood during the darkest days of the invasion. How to fight against superior odds. How to win when winning seemed impossible. How to never give up. And Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance, looking at the stars and wondering what else was out there. What other civilizations they would meet. What other challenges they would face. What other impossible victories they would achieve. The galaxy had made a mistake when it overlooked humanity. Earth had been judged and found wanting by species who measured worth in technology and military power. They had not understood that humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons or their ships. It was their resolve. Their absolute refusal to be defeated. Their willingness to face annihilation rather than surrender their freedom. Zarthok had learned that lesson the hard way. The galaxy was still learning it, and humanity, united and unbroken, stood ready to teach it to anyone who made the same mistake. The story of Earth's survival would spread across the stars, told in 1,000 languages by 1,000 species. The tale of the primitive world that refused to die, that fought an empire and won, that proved technology was not everything. And whenever species faced their own impossible challenges, they would remember Earth. They would remember that resolve and determination could triumph over any odds. They would remember that humanity, when pushed to the edge, had chosen to push back. And they had won. Zarthok watched all of this from his comfortable prison. He had access to news feeds, could see how Earth was transforming. The planet he had expected to conquer easily was becoming a power in its own right. In a few years, these humans might be strong enough to threaten the Krithian Empire itself. He had made one mistake. Just one. He had judged Earth by its divisions rather than its potential for unity. He had measured humans by their technology rather than their spirit. He had assumed that a species without interstellar travel would lack the will to resist a galactic empire. He had learned too late that nothing in the universe was more dangerous than a human with something to protect. And Earth, now united and armed, had everything to protect. Gravity failed. Emergency systems kicked in, but half of them were not responding. His mighty warship, his pride, the vessel that had conquered systems, was crippled. Damage report, he demanded. The reports came back devastating. Main power offline. Weapon systems disabled. Engines at minimum function. Life support on emergency backup. And the planet killer weapon was completely destroyed, along with 3 entire decks of his ship. Commander, human vessels are surrounding us, Velkar reported. They are demanding we surrender. Zarthok stared at the tactical display in disbelief. He had come here expecting an easy conquest. Instead, he had been beaten by primitives with inferior technology and nothing but determination. We don't need to win, Jake replied. We just need to stop that weapon from firing. Get me Captain Foster at Liberty Station. Ryan Foster's face appeared on the view screen. He looked tired, his face lined with stress and grief. But his eyes were clear, determined. I'm guessing you're about to ask me to do something stupid, Ryan said. How do you feel about ramming Liberty into a Krithian flagship? Jake asked. Ryan smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had already accepted his death and was at peace with it. I thought you'd never ask. Ed the species completely. They think we're weak, Marcus said to his staff. They think we'll break. They don't understand what they've done. They've given us a reason to stop fighting each other and start fighting them. He pulled up a map showing Krithian positions worldwide. Send this to all allied forces. Share everything we know. Every tactic that works in Australia gets distributed immediately. We learn from each other. We adapt. That's what humans do. On the Dominion, Zarthok stared at his casualty reports and felt something he had not experienced in decades. Uncertainty. Jake Morrison looked at the alien ships through the viewport and felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear, exactly. Something harder than that. Something that would not break, no matter what came next. Prepare for combat operations, Admiral Hayes ordered. All ships, all stations, all defense platforms. If they want to fight, we'll give them one they'll remember. Across the planet, 8 billion people looked up at the sky and made the same choice their ancestors had made 10,000 times before. They would not run. They would not hide. They would fight. Zarthok had made his first mistake. He had judged humanity by their technology. He had measured them by their divisions. He had assumed that a species still bound to a single planet would lack the will to resist a galactic empire. He was about to learn how wrong he was,